Awesome. Cool.
Guys, welcome to the podcast.
What's going on? We got a guest.
We got a
Yes.
guest. We got
Hello,
Dasha
hello.
here.
Hello,
We'll
hello.
we'll jump in. We won't do any crazy introduction, but just give you guys context of the podcast. We'll be talking about a good amount of nutrition stuff because we get asked about nutrition related questions. It's like, hey, bro, like gut health, or like, yo, bro, my farts smell like this, or like my, digestion feels like this, all these things. And we can answer it in a generic sense where, like, yeah, bro, eat more fruits and vegetables and get more fiber up and drink more water, which might
Mhm.
help in a decent amount, but there's obviously some more depth to it, and we're not experts in it, but that's why Dasha is here. So I'll let Dasha introduce herself and then drop some knowledge on us.
All right, awesome. Well, my name is Dasha Tereshenko. I like to be labeled, I guess, as like a nutrition specialist, which is pretty cool because I never really considered myself one. My background is in actually business, and I did business first for schooling, and then I completely redirected my path towards health and nutrition.
So,
I've always been around like health and nutrition my entire life. Like my mom's a pharmacist, a naturopath, and a herbalist, so I've always had that in my family. Long story short, I decided to go to school for muscle activation therapy, for manual muscle therapy, and that leaked into me now being in school for naturopathy. So, learning to become a naturopathic doctor, and then along the way there, I kind of sort of picked up a lot of nutritional knowledge. Yeah, and a lot of self-taught stuff, a lot of researching, a lot of hours reading books, textbooks, not just online articles, like actual
yeah.
textbooks. Getting into like herbal remedies and stuff like that. So that's my entire path basically so far. Yeah.
So you let's take a little step back. So I think you brushed off a lot of the fun stuff. And again, when someone maybe sees like from the outside looking in, it's like, hey, like you have pretty good physique, you've been lifting for a long time. That's one of the biggest things that stands out as well, and then nutrition background as well.
Yeah.
Um, so what made you be like, okay, because you did muscle activation, you did business, and then
Hmm.
we'll go into too also like you did like some bodybuilding stuff, all that stuff,
Yep.
but now you're more into the nutritional path. So what made you transition into like, yo, I gotta learn way more about nutrition? Like, was there something like, yo, like I gotta just dive deeper into nutrition, like this is the gap?
Yeah,
Or
so a lot of it came from like my old like I guess like childhood experiences. Like a little bit
okay,
of background is I did go through an eating disorder from the ages of like 13 to 18. I had like severe anorexia, and that kind of sort of leaks into you becoming overly obsessive with food, meaning like you want to learn everything inside and out about food, calories. What is a calorie? How does it work? What is it doing to my body? Like you become extremely obsessive over, I guess, the whole notion of nutrition and food and how to like survive with the bare minimum because you have such a poor body image, right? And that's kind of sort of how it started for me. So I've always had interest in it. And then as I kind of sort of went on through my university like section of my life, the 4 years I was like severely like unhealthy. Even though I went
mm,
to the gym and like I did everything and I got in shape and my eating disorder was a little bit like, like gone. I developed really bad like eating habits, like really bad drinking habits, just overall the whole like university like lifestyle of like partying and no sleep, like who cares? Like, you're staying up late doing exams, over caffeinating yourself. So once that kind of sort of started to hit me and I decided to go down the route of like taking bodybuilding a little bit more seriously, when I realized I'm like, yo, I can't be doing this and then also trying to bodybuild at the same time. So my shift kind of sort of happened to more of a specific of like, okay, well, how does nutrition affect performance? And then from there, I did my first bodybuilding show. And after my first bodybuilding show, and like I did a bunch of PEDs that I'm not obviously like, too fond of now, looking back, going over that whole experience. But leading into my show and then after my show, realizing how nutrition can actually be like a healing process for the body. You can actually heal your body with food because of all the conditions and all the issues I developed because of that show. I made a little post about it on my page how I've actually like experienced loss of period because of my bodybuilding, and how I actually fixed a lot of that through food. So that just completely like just zoned me in on studying like, oh my gosh, like food is just so much more than energy. It's so much more than just like tasting good. It's actually something that's so intricate in our body and so misunderstood by like society in general right now. I just decided I'm like, you know what? We're gonna study this. We're gonna really learn how food can fix people and how we can help other people who may not know they're suffering with things that they don't maybe have to go the pharmaceutical route, or maybe they don't have to get that surgery. They can reduce their inflammatory markers, like all this really cool stuff that you realize how much depth is in there that you could study this for the rest of your life and never fully know everything. So yeah.
this that's probably why we'll probably have you like 10 times. We'll do like a 10-20 part series, right?
Sure.
Go over every
Unpack,
single part,
unpack a lot.
unpack.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the coolest things you've said already is like, okay, when you were doing the show, physical wise or appearance wise, you probably
Yeah.
looked like the most fit person, right?
Right.
But you felt like the most unhealthy or like the unfit person, right?
Feel
Which
like
is
shit. Yeah.
it's the funniest thing, right? Because people want this physique and they
Yeah.
relate that physique to health. But
Hmm.
then that physique is what made you learn about health because your health wasn't good. It's
Right.
such a
It's
it's so
interesting.
funny, right? Yeah, it's so interesting. Okay,
Very
so
interesting. Yeah.
we'll dive into actually one thing you mentioned with nutrition for performance, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people that I think watch this, all the 6, 7 people, and us, I think we're more curious, right?
Sure.
Is how can we use nutrition to improve our performance? And I'm assuming like digestion is a big part of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So do you have a hierarchy when it comes to like nutrition performance, maybe? Like this is what matters the most, and then we can maybe break that down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think the hierarchy would start with overall how you are feeling. And that's a very like blanket term in terms of saying how someone feels, right?
Okay.
But we're looking at more like how is your quality of life with the food you're eating? So are you
Mm,
able to get up in the morning and like be able to open your eyes and realize that it's morning? You know, your body kind of sort of gets into its circadian rhythm. Like, do you get energy from like just being awake, first of all, right? Besides the
okay.
grogginess and like the typical caffeine need, there's like a certain like feeling that you have when you know that the food from the night before, like you have a positive impact on the body, meaning like your bowel movements are like the same every morning, right? It's a clockwork. So is your body responding like clockwork? Do you have a consistent rhythm, right? And that a lot comes from, yes, like habitual things that we do, but also from our nutrition. So
Okay.
starting at like, how does your body feel overall?
Okay.
And then that leaks into, okay, well, feeling has to come from absorbing, right? In order for you to feel good, you have to actually absorb the things you're eating. So that's where I feel like digestion comes into play because there are two simultaneous things that need to happen in order for you to feel good. You need to absorb and digest food properly. In order for you to digest and feel food properly, you got to sort of be in a good mental state. That whole gut mind connection, right? We do have that access between the gut and the brain. So that is like to me the most crucial part of anybody, whether you're an athlete, whether you're like the, Gen Pop, whatever. If that isn't right, forget about anything else being right. Or it will be feeling right, but it'll be very short-lived, right?
Mm,
So that's when we start looking at things like, okay, the number one thing that everyone jumps to is like your gut microbiome. Like, how is your gut health? How is the bacteria in your gut? Like, a lot of the times people are just like shooting at you, oh, take probiotics or this gut friendly thing, or this is for your boosting of your gut bacteria, all these things. But
yeah.
sometimes people don't realize is that there's usually a lot more to gut health than meets the eye, right? The gut microbiome and the bacteria is just one thing, but then we're looking at the actual health of the tissue in the gut, right? Are your intestines functioning properly? Are they able to diffuse and absorb things correctly, right? So you
Yeah.
have a lot of the digestion that happens in the small intestine, and then the last pieces of absorbency that happen throughout the colon. So along that path, it's like, is everything happening in the sequences that it should be happening, right? So then we get into that factor of first, okay, overall feeling, okay, how's the gut health? How is the absorbency and the health of the gut? And then we can look at stool, obviously, right? That's super important because you
Yeah.
might feel like you're absorbing everything, but if you're running to the bathroom 7 times a day and it's like a water fountain, we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
Um, that could be another thing to look at, right? And then overall, you want to look at like just performance of the person and not just
Okay.
physical performance, but I'm talking about more so cognitive performance because the number one thing that the food will fuel is the brain, right? So the
Okay.
brain is responsible, obviously, for everything in the body. But if your food isn't fueling your cells correctly and your brain isn't functioning correctly and your mental function is not good, your physical function down the road will not be good either, right?
Mm,
So it's kind of sort of we can look at it like a bottom up, up bottom approach. And
okay.
then we can start looking at overall, like, okay, well, if it's not that deep, then yes, are you able to like perform in the gym, right? Are you getting
Okay.
pumps? Like, are you able to recover? How is it like between sets? Like, are you cramping? Like, is there like mineral deficiencies happening? Which is also a gut thing, right? That's also like malabsorption of magnesium and all that other stuff. So it's like if you look at it, it ends up being one big pinwheel of like brain to gut to muscle to body to brain to gut, and it just keeps going around and around and around as you eat food, right?
Yeah.
So I have a little bit more of like a broader look at it now that I have a bit more knowledge in it.
Yeah.
But the very basic thing is yes, like you guys are on the right track. It starts a lot with gut health, like a
Good health.
lot. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll kind of step back here and let's make this more objective, right?
Hmm.
Just so someone can apply it. So like let's go to the feeling part. I know
Yep.
we mentioned waking up with a bit more energy. How
Hmm.
does like is it consistent? Like you can wake up because I have this all the time where like I'll have 3 days in a row where I wake up and like I feel jacked, everything feels amazing. But then like the fourth, fifth day I might be like I just feel really tired. I have to chug
Yep.
like 2 to 3 black coffees to kind of get everything going again, right? So it's like these waves.
Hmm.
Um, so is there something where you can objectify a little bit, or it's more just like, okay, this is how I feel. Is there a way to
So
objectify?
there usually is. Typically you also look at like the person's overall like nervous system, right? Like in terms of
Okay.
like if like for example, if like you had a harder night, like let's say out of those 3 days that you feel fantastic, and then the fourth day you wake up feeling like you need an extra coffee,
Yeah.
you may have inquired something along in your environment that day, or like the weather, the pressure outside wasn't good. It's like there's also little factors that do influence that. But if
Okay.
you were to like take like a general overview of your week and how you're waking up every morning, a good like let's say out of the 7 days, a good 4 or 5 days, you're and then consistently every week you're like that, you're feeling about the same. Most likely your nutritional adequacies are good. Like your sleep is good. You wake up rested from your sleep. And like I said, your bowel movements are pretty much like clockwork, especially if you're waking up at the same time, right?
Okay.
Usually people feel a lot like more energized after their first bowel movement because again, you remove all the toxic stuff that's
Yeah.
accumulated, right? So you usually feel pretty good. You shouldn't need that much caffeine. But then we get into other issues of like, okay, well, like fiber absorbency, like are you withdrawing all the water from your colon, like all that other stuff. But essentially a pretty good gauge is like, okay, if out of the 7 days, like more than 50% of the time you're feeling pretty damn good, it's a good objective marker to use.
So
Okay.
it's like waking up in the morning, feeling like you have energy is like the one thing. And then the second thing after that would be like how your stool or like how your shit looks essentially in the
Yeah,
morning.
pretty much. Yeah, it's like two checks to really look out for. It's like, okay, you wake up in the morning, are you groggy? Like, do you feel like you have brain fog? Like, is there something that maybe like you overdid it on the sugar the day before? That's usually the number one thing is if individuals overeat like on sugar or high carb meals before bed, the next morning they feel extremely like lethargic and groggy, right?
Mm.
Very rarely do individuals wake up feeling like super energized because like carbs and glucose, right? No, it's actually the complete opposite. Your metabolism gets, I guess, don't really like using the term sluggish, but if you eat a lot of glucose before sleep, you will ultimately wake up feeling super, super tired, right? Because the body just had so much like shuttling to do and so much like highs and lows of blood sugar throughout the night that like you wake up, you're like exhausted, right? So that's a pretty
Okay.
cool one to use. Is like notice how you feel after, like, for example, if you had like a cheat meal the night before. Usually people waking up the next day not really feeling 100%, but like they get more energy in the gym, but the next morning they're like, tired and groggy and throws off their bowel habits and stuff too. So
And
yeah,
this is another area where you can probably do yeah, 100%. The bowel movements always get thrown off after like
super important. People,
Scotty Bonds, man. God damn, bro. This is so spicy. It's
yeah.
yeah. So what's the objective thing? Like how does we won't go into too many groggy details, but is there like a spectrum of how the bowels should look like? Bowel movements?
Well, yeah. Well, typically, like you did mention, you talked to someone else
Yeah.
about this already, right? So you
Yeah.
want to be looking for like overall firmness.
Firmness. Okay.
Length will depend on like again how much food you eat volume wise.
Okay.
You can look at color and smell, right? Those are like usually the thing.
Mm,
It's like, yeah, it's
mm.
great. Color, smell, firmness, length.
Amazing.
And obviously like making sure that like, it's pretty consistent. You don't have any pain, like when the stool is passing, all that stuff. But the number one thing you want to look for is obviously firmness. Firmness means that your
Okay.
intestines are doing their job. The water is being absorbed, nutritions are being absorbed. This is just the byproduct being pulled out, right? Color, again, you typically want it to be like a darkish brown, like overall, like that turd color,
I got
that's
you.
like the typical color you want. If you have things like pale stool or yellow stool, that could be like indications of liver issues or like too much bile being produced, so the liver's malfunctioning, right? Green stool could be just like a potential miscoloring from food you eat. Sometimes it could be signs of an infection if it's like slimy and coated, if it smells bad, right? Usually, if it's slimy and it smells bad, there is a gut microbiome issue. You have an overgrowth of one of two bacterias. And that's something to kind of sort of take a look at, or like your overall like mucus levels in your body are high. So there's a lot
Okay.
like very detailed things, but typically, like I said, just the firmness, like make sure it's not too hard, like you're not,
I
constipated.
got you.
And
Yeah.
then the color, yeah, color and smell. You don't want it to be really smelly either, because that could be too much of one macronutrient in the body, as we know.
So
Yeah.
is this like a problem or like when it's like more constipated and when it's more like slimy, is that a problem if it happens like all the time or like constantly, or is it like even if it's a one-off thing, it's probably something we should address?
So if it's a one-off thing, like I said, it's usually like pretty normal. Like you get like out of like again out of all your 7 day bowel movements, like one day like you had something a little too spicy, you're probably gonna have a little bit looser stool the next day, which is fine. But we're talking about like individuals like paired with other symptoms. Like let's say they have like really like mucousy, like yellow colored stool, right? Usually it's a liver issue or something with the gallbladder. But then they'll have other issues like really bad bloating. They feel really full after they eat. They feel almost like they regurgitate their food sometimes. They're super lethargic. They have brain fog. They have really bad skin. Like there's other things that are usually paired with the bowel issue that indicate like, okay, there's something else going on with the person. But if it's a one-off, it's usually never a concern. Like I shouldn't say never, but it's not like an immediate concern that you have to like be like, oh my God, like looking in the toilet every day, being like obsessing over your stool, right? Type thing. But yeah, no, one-offs are usually just the one-offs, yeah.
Because I remember listening to like a Dr. Hyman podcast like a while back, and he was talking about the bowel movement stuff, and he was like the bowel should look like an anaconda, like a snake, looking back at you. So that kind of
Wow.
fits the realm of like
Yeah.
firmness, length, and like the turd color,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
yeah, but like yeah, it's weird. This is I guess
Right.
more this. I don't know if this is gonna help anybody, but this question, but like I notice it's pretty nice most of the time, and then
Hmm.
couple days when I drink like when I get up a little bit earlier and I don't have my regular time for the bowel movement and I have a couple coffees, like I have a
Hmm.
couple black coffees, empty stomach, and then I
Hmm.
go, then it ends up being a little bit more not as firm and lengthy. Is that
Yeah.
a is that normal? Like
That is normal because caffeine has like almost like a laxative slash like I guess stool loosening effect.
okay.
It does it affects how the water filtrates in the intestine. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost as if like imagine taking a plunger and just like rushing it through your entire
Oh, sick.
system.
So it's not a
It
bad thing.
boosts. It's not a bad thing. It's really good if you're having a hard time going to the bathroom, right? There's all those like
Yeah.
remedies that people use for like constipation, like take a tablespoon of olive oil or like
Mm,
milk with olive oil or something like that. But if you just drink a black coffee on an empty stomach, it usually gets like the motility in the stomach going really quickly. You got
yeah.
to remember like caffeine's a neural stimulant as well, and you have nerves
Yeah.
in your intestines, so it'll just
Mm,
like wake everything up, right? So it's
okay.
totally normal. Yeah. But you're
Wicked.
pushing
Okay.
it faster.
I love it. We're lubricating the bowel a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, sick. So we got quality and then we got bowel movement. And the second was gut health, right?
Mhm.
So the gut health, again, we won't get too deep into the gut health because that's going to be so many. That could be the whole podcast.
It's a
Um,
lot, yeah.
but is there like one or two things you can objectify to notice like if you have decent gut health? And I guess it probably goes into the whole energy and
Mhm.
what we just talked about. But is there anything else you would say? Because you said something about intestines and big words. So
Big words, yeah, lots of big words. So no, typically what you want to look for to be like a precursor for gut health, right? If your gut microbiome's in a proper like state. Number one is overall, like I guess you could say feeling. Number two is, are you feeling satisfied after your meals? Meaning
mm,
like you eat your food, you're full, you should be satiated, and like you feel an adequate amount of food that has been eaten is doing you something, right? Because if your gut is not signaling your brain correctly, you're going to never have proper satiety. And those are the people who are like, I can just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and never really trigger like that ghrelin response or that satiety response. They have like a malfunction between feeling full, being full, and actually signaling the brain that they are full. And that has a lot to do with like your gut, like the overall integrity of your gut. Yes, your gut bacteria, but also to like that vagal nerve signaling from the brain to the gut to the stomach, like expanding, contracting, knowing that it's like it's full, right? So that'll be another thing. It's just overall how satiated do you feel? And then the third thing would be is the big one is bloating. Like it's very, very overrated, I feel like, but it's also not discussed enough as to what bloating entitles. So especially in the bodybuilding realm, we're so like bloating is so normalized. Like, bro, like you just ate like 300 grams of rice and like 7 ounces of chicken. It's fine. You're going to be bloated. Like yes but no, it's like that bloating is also a sign that like the food is not being absorbed, like the food is not being properly processed. You're literally scarfing down large quantities of food that you are not like your body is not like the environment is not there for it, right? So definitely like I said, energy, overall satiety, and then bloating and fullness is like the top three things I would look at for gut health, because those three things will leak into the whole concept of nutrient absorption and then overall well-being, right? So it's kind of like a cascade effect from one to the other.
When you say
Okay.
bloating, like if we could just define that, what does that look like? What does that feel like for someone?
Yeah, so again, it could be that's very subjective, right? Because everyone describes bloating as different, but let's kind of sort of narrow it down to a bit of a like a tummy protrusion, like it's a visible protrusion. So like when you eat, you clearly will have a bit of a bloated tummy, but we're talking about like, okay, 10 minutes after eating, your gut is like you're pregnant, like a food coma baby type thing, right? And then we're looking at, okay, are you getting gas? So are you getting gassy? Because when you eat, you're obviously signaling the digestive juices, you're getting the microbiome and you're like your tummy excited. It's like starting to work and digest things. And when that activity happens, it starts to create like little organism functions that create gas. But gas is like it's normal, but it's not at the same time, right? Because if you're getting gassy after everything you eat, it means your digestion's like not the greatest. It's not like your body is not primed to receive this food, pretty much is what it's telling you, right? So that means prebiotics, the actual environment for the probiotics is not there. So then the probiotics aren't able to do their job because their environment's not good. And then at the same time, you're putting food down your stomach, which can throw off your stomach acid levels. And if those aren't good, then the whole, like I said, it's the whole cascade effect of just indigestion or acid reflux or like, man, I just feel so full all the time. I'm always bloated, right? So it's kind of like one of those things there. It's usually bloating is another really big issue and a big sign of bad gut health. Yeah.
So let's actually this because I think this is probably going to be something that helps a lot of people in terms of the
Right.
bloating. So let's do
Yep.
practical steps of someone. How can they reverse engineer improving their bloating? Would there be certain things someone would look at? I know we already talked about certain things. I'm sure it kind of
Yep.
all ties in together. But
Yep.
what would be the backtracking of like, hey, like I feel like I'm pregnant after every meal. I feel gassy. My protein farts smell really nasty, but like I love them. Because my coach said protein is number one for muscle growth. So
All
farts
right.
probably mean a good thing, but I think you just said it's not a good thing. So how can I improve this situation?
Yeah, so we want to also start off by looking at the foods you're eating, right? So
Okay,
what are your trigger foods, right? If it's
there you go.
everything that you eat, if it's everything that you eat, I mean like from like protein to like a chicken breast to like tofu to like let's say you eat a piece of bread or a vegetable and you're getting like that bloated response, we're looking at more of like a pathology potentially or something wrong with the body. So that's a little bit more niche, right? So if we're like really bloated after everything we consume, even water, we probably have something going on with an organ. And that's a little bit of like a separate issue and a little bit more in depth. But like, let's look at, for example, you get really bloated when you eat, like, I don't know, rice. Like, you
Yeah,
notice you're fine with potatoes, you're fine with this, but specifically when you eat rice, you get bloated. Okay, cool. We have to then take a look at what are you pairing the rice with? Because sometimes food pairing matters, right? Or like what is the volume of rice you're eating in one sitting? So what a person can do is they can try to break that bigger meal up into smaller meals. Reason for that is because hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is your stomach acid content. Sometimes we are low on that, just overall based off of like our lifestyle, stress, modernized food, like really processed food, right? Unfortunately, it kills a lot of like our body's natural acidity because some acids we need in our body clearly. So too much volume of food will affect how much stomach acid you produce. So that will also lead to bloating. So what we can do is split that meal up into two, right? So try a little bit of a smaller portion. If that works, great. Then you don't have an issue with the rice. If it doesn't work, then we can start looking at, okay, that specific starch, the way it's digested. What is wrong with that starch? Maybe it's too much of a quick access sugar for the body. Then we can look at things like, okay, well, on top of the rice, what else causes you these reactions? Let's say you're somebody who like eats a sweet treat and you get bloated as well and you get gassy. And then you also eat dairy and you get gassy. Okay, so dairy is a sugar. There's lactose in dairy. Sugar is sugar, it's glucose. So you're feeding something in the tummy that causes a reaction to get bloated. 9 times out of 10, that's like a type of bacteria overgrowth, right? So you have too much bad bacteria. Okay, cool. So what we can do is probably reduce that food, change it up for a different substitution, add in things like garlic, cinnamon. There's like a whole thing you can do for like actual bad bacteria overgrowth. Try that out and then go back to eating the rice again in smaller portions and see if it feels better. Feels better? Cool. We address the issue, right? So there's like a lot of steps somebody can take to pinpoint what it is that is causing their bloating. But the number one rule of thumb that actually me and Karthar talk about is that stick to food groups that settle well with your digestion. The food groups and the foods that you know will not cause a reaction in the body. Um, if you're trying to self fix, right? Just stick to things that you know digest really well with you, and stick to food groups that you know aren't going to be triggering. And another thing you can do is I don't really like to like recommend this to people because everybody just thinks this is the solution without getting a proper like analysis is like digestive enzymes, right? And we don't have to take digestive enzymes in the form of pill. We can actually get them from food sources. So things like pineapple and papaya have a high amount of things called bromelain. And bromelain is actually a really good enzyme for digesting protein. It literally, like pineapple can dissolve flesh. That's how strong it is. So things like pineapple, or you can take the actual bromelain itself in a like enzyme formula. You can do things like kombucha, which I know I've shared with you before. That kind of helps
Yeah.
with motility and overall helping the digestive process start.
Hmm.
And then you can also incorporate a lot of fermented foods. Fermented foods kind of sort of kickstart the digestive process in the mouth already. So like most people don't know is that like a lot of the times your digestion starts already the second the food hits your saliva. That's where all your digestive enzymes are, your prolase, your amylase, your lipase, all the enzymes that break down the macronutrients. It starts here and it continues digesting down your esophagus. So we can look at taking things that kind of kickstart that digestion, right? So fermented foods. So there's really like a lot that somebody can do, but my first recommendation will always be find trigger foods. Find the foods that are bothering your stomach, write them down on a little list, and kind of sort of play the process of elimination. Like see how your body feels when you take something out and when you put it in, or if you take something out but add it in with a small dose, or if you take something out and pair it with something else and see if it digests better, right? For example, I don't know if you've ever been to Copacabana, like that steakhouse, the restaurant where they're serving
Yeah.
bare protein, right? It's like
Yeah.
unlimited protein. They come around, they serve pineapple as well. So
Mm.
that's a really big digestive boost as to why people can eat so much there is because that pineapple helps break down the meat already. It makes it easier to digest. It makes your body able to absorb it better. So like that's how they figured that out. It's like if you take pineapple, pair it with protein, you'll get more protein absorption because you're breaking it down, right? You're making it more accessible. So it's little things like that that people can try to do before they just jump to like supplementation and like oh my gosh, like I need to take probiotics, right? Like it's those are like the end tools that you use, but first just start off by eliminating and pinpointing trigger foods.
You're gonna sell out all the pineapples in Brampton. Everyone's
Sorry.
this is
Everyone's gonna go buy pineapples and pineapples and papayas.
this is gonna be more of like a side topic. So you know how some people recommend eating fruits by the season or like vegetables by the
Yep.
season, like seasonal
Yep.
fruits.
Yep.
So would you recommend that at all? Like in terms of obviously this is a different topic, bloating wise, but
Yeah.
pineapples and papayas have a different season, and
Yes,
then
of course. Yeah, yeah.
so would you
Imported
recommend
and stuff.
going by that phase at all or
So it's a very complicated, and again, that
okay?
this could be like its own podcast of itself. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for if we're talking about like the general population, like we're talking about the general gym bro that just wants to get healthy, right?
Yeah.
I think it'll just come down to making better food choices in general.
Yeah.
If we're looking at a specific individual who has like underlying health issues, underlying pathologies, there's something wrong with them, or like they're at the point where they've tried everything basic and now they need like something different for sure, we can start looking at food origins, seasonal foods, foods grown with or without herbicides, pesticides, whatever. But that's more so for the individual who, like I said, is that niche client that has very like predominant issues that the basic stuff can't solve. Like
Okay,
if you've
so
had a client with like digestive upset for like years and nothing works, then you can start looking at seasonal crops and all that stuff. But typically
okay.
speaking, for pineapple and papaya, it's imported year round.
Okay.
I know that like certain countries do have a growing season for it, so you can just like check out like what's seasonal in that country at the time it's being imported and kind of base it off of that. But it'll still have the same nutritional value. It's just differently grown and probably a little bit different like contents in it, essentially.
Cool.
I got you.
So
Only
just to
reason, yeah, go
recap
ahead.
bloating real quick in terms of
Yeah,
fixes.
Yeah.
What I kind of got down from that was find the trigger foods,
yeah,
split it up first. So try not
Mhm.
to have like super big meals. And then if it's still a problem, try swapping out the carb source or the starchy source.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And then we can start looking at like why is that person getting triggered by that food, right? Because there's again, like I said, without going into too much detail and like
yeah.
ranting about this for hours, there's a lot that could be the reason for it, right? But typically, like in our field and the people that we deal with, it's usually a volume issue, a food selection issue, and just an indigestion issue that can be fixed relatively easily, right?
Okay. And then you mentioned garlic and cinnamon. What was that thing it helps with again? Like those two things?
Okay, yeah. So again, without going like too much
Yeah,
sciencey stuff, you people can because of our highly processed diet in North America and just overall like over the years of like industrialization, fillers, sugars, and everything has sugar in it nowadays. the body's adaptation to specific gut bacteria has obviously prevailed. We now have a pandemic of individuals with candida overgrowth. It's a type of yeast basically that grows in the tummy and it feeds off of sugar. And not everybody has this, but there's usually pretty telltale signs, sorry, that somebody does have a candida imbalance. They'll have like the white tongue, like like that white residue on their tongue.
Okay.
They'll have like more like eye mucus. They'll be very bloated all the time. They're gonna crave sugar a lot. Like I'm talking about like an abnormal like sugar craving. Like they need to have something sweet after every meal. That's usually a sign that they might have like a little bit too much candida. So their ratio of candida to like lactobacillus, all the other good bacteria, is off. So the
Mm,
candida is basically taking over. So proven things in naturopathic medicine that have been used to kill off the candida and actually boost digestion and reduce the symptoms of the gas, bloating, like bad stool and all that stuff. It's like it's garlic and cinnamon and then even cayenne pepper. These are like very old, like traditional, like Ayurvedic medicine type, Chinese medicine type remedies. But people usually take like capsules of ginger. You can take capsules of cayenne pepper, like specifically dosed for like ingestion. Don't just go taking spoons of cinnamon and cayenne, by the way, because you're
oh
gonna give
shit.
yourself an ulcer. You're gonna give
Okay.
yourself an ulcer. So just disclaimer to anyone watching this: this isn't like health advice to go and just start taking the cinnamon challenge again.
Yeah.
They come in capsule form, and same thing with garlic. You have to take it with food, because again,
Okay.
it's very strong. You can get an ulcer. So just
Yeah.
again, don't go eating garlic. But yeah, those things have been proven to stabilize blood sugar, reduce inflammation, and also to help with that candida overgrowth, right?
So even just like even if you don't have this yeast overgrowth or this issue, you can still obviously use these foods as like a normal mitigation for health, right? Like cinnamon,
Yeah,
garlic. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, there's lots of like benefits to them, right? I know like
Okay.
cinnamon's a big one used for blood glucose leveling.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been used for like decades. Garlic's been really good for immune function, right? Because
Sick.
of the actual like byproducts it has. Good for inflammation. Same thing with ginger. I didn't mention ginger and the other thing. Ginger as well. Again,
Yeah.
decades of medicine studies for lots of benefits. And cayenne pepper as well, right? It boosts circulation. That's the number one thing it's really good for is boosting circulation.
Perfect.
And then the red pigment in it as well is good for like cardiovascular health. It's good for like everything else in the body, right? So yeah.
Sick. So like these are food that plus the papaya, pineapple, and then
Yep.
fermented foods and like the kombucha. Say
Yep.
like
Yep.
somebody goes and adds all those to their diet and they don't even have any issues. They're just feeling
Yeah.
nice already. Is
Yeah.
that something that's going to be like nice way of mitigating any future things, or it's
Like a
sometimes not good?
preventative cause, right?
Yeah,
Like a preventative.
yeah, yeah. Because somebody like, someone's like 18 years old or 16 years listening to this and they already feel good. They're like full of energy, but
Mhm.
then now they make all these healthy choices or healthy per se, whatever. Um, is that a good approach still, or you would still keep it so like specific to the individual if they have certain
I
things come up?
Yeah, I would still say you can overdo too much like on a good thing, right?
Okay, I got
So
you.
you don't want to go and like start taking every single like how if you watch another podcast or like let's say you listen to something on TikTok, you're not going to go and
Yeah.
start implementing all those remedies all at once, right? You're
You don't
probably
know.
going to make it worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's people probably who do that, but I strongly advise against that. Like
Yeah.
always start by and another thing too is always start by implementing just one strategy at a time,
Wicked.
right?
Yeah.
Don't like go take everything because you're not going to know what helped.
Got
Right.
you.
So like I'll have people inquiring with me about things like I took probiotics, digestive enzymes, I started a colon cleanse. I'm like, okay, hang on. Like we need to see like one thing at a time, implement one strategy at a time before you go and throw everything at the body because you can actually do
Yeah.
more damage that way, right?
Mm.
Too much of anything, like too much enzymes, too much pineapple can cause side effects. Like you can get ulcers. You can
Like
literally get like stomach acid too high and then you're gonna have other issues, right? So
like too much in a day or like too much in a span of like say like you have like 100 grams of pineapple every day for the rest of your life. Is that okay?
that's usually okay. Yeah, like a
Okay.
daily thing
All
is
right.
okay, like small amounts, right? But I'm talking
Okay.
about like if you're gonna go and take pineapple and then take garlic and then drink 3 things of kombucha a day and
I
you
got
don't
you.
have any of those problems, you're probably gonna do yourself more harm than good. So yeah.
There you go. Okay, that's good to know. Because like I'm usually like I listen to like one thing. I'd be like, I'm just gonna implement all of this, right, as like a bandage without knowing if it's helping or not. So like I
Yeah.
have kimchi and pineapple every day ever since we talked,
Yeah,
right?
it's
But I have
that's
30
that's the
grams of
clutch staple.
kimchi. Yeah, 30 grams of kimchi, 100 grams of pineapple every day, right?
Yeah.
And that has been really blessed for me. So, and I got
Yeah.
that from you. So, okay. And I throw in some cinnamon on my oatmeal too, which
There you go. Perfect.
makes it taste pretty bomb.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm already
Awesome.
healthy. Great.
There you go. You're perfect. You're doing great.
Yeah. Okay, so now backing track. That's not even a word, but backtracking. We talked about quality, feeling good, energy in the morning, absorption, gut health, stool we already talked about. Now let's come to the fun part, performance, right?
Mhm.
So there's two ways we broke it down, performance, cognitive and in the gym, right? So what would you objectify a little bit if you can in terms of cognitive performance? Like what does that look like?
Right. So I definitely would narrow it down to concentration levels
Okay.
and like clarity of thinking. Meaning like how's your memory? Like are you starting to get forgetful, right? Again, we already know that diets that are highly processed, diets that are high in sugar lead to things like memory fog, memory loss, like really bad like attention spans, right?
Okay.
So how is your overall concentration and how is your memory and how is your mental clarity? Like, are you able to sit down and read for 10 minutes at a time without feeling like glitchy or like feeling like you have to read the same sentence 50 times just to absorb it, right? Are you able to like recall little basic pieces of information that like you might need the next hour or two, right? And like when someone's conversating with you, are you able to listen and engage in the conversation, or does your mind like wander, right? Not like
Yeah.
wander in terms of like you're a super stressed individual and you're thinking about like 50 things, but like in terms of like, are you like able to like actively listen? People don't really like put that together with nutrition, but there have been many studies that show, especially in children who have very high sugar diets, their mental capacity is just completely out of whack, right? And the
Yeah.
same thing will apply to adults, right? Adults that are like living off of like ice caps and Tim Hortons donuts, right? I'm pretty sure you're gonna try talking to them and they're like gone, spaced out, right? That too, plus again,
Okay.
the candida we were talking about, it causes that as well, right? So that's
Okay.
a mind
That's
gut connection right there, right?
And you
Yeah.
can there's like couple is there supplements that you can help with the focus? Because I know obviously first thing will be food because people jump
Hmm.
right. The only reason I'm asking is especially nowadays, I do the same thing. You jump right to the supplements if you don't have focus.
Yeah.
Like I suck, I don't
Yeah.
have focus. We don't really like try to reverse engineer the problem. We're just like, okay,
Yeah.
how can I just aid this? And like you just lion's mane, caffeine, everything it just comes in,
Yeah.
right? So what
Yeah.
would there be a place for that in this scenario?
There would be, and again, for the general senses of like, okay, like we don't really have like the capacity to reverse engineer it. If we're looking at like enhancing cognitive function, there's a lot of things you can take, right? There's like so many things out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, the easiest one would be caffeine. Clearly, it creates a little bit more mental alertness, right? You can look at things like Bacopa. Bacopa has been really good at helping with actual just neuron firing. Alpha GPC, we've talked about before, also really good at getting the neurons firing, getting the brain connectivity going. You can look at things like glutathione, things like B1. Actually, B1 vitamin is really, really good for overall acetylcholine production. Again, without getting superly like nerdy about it, but that's super
Yeah.
important when you're looking at like nerve function in the body.
Okay.
Lion's mane's great, right? Any kind of cordyceps mushrooms are been known to help with cognitive function in adults. So things like that. And a really big underlooked one is actually omega-3.
Mm.
Not only just again, omega-3 is a broad spectrum supplement where it does a lot for gut health, it does a lot for cardiovascular health and actually brain health because your brain is how many percent, it's 75% fat, right? Or 80% fat, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's mainly made out of fat. And again, a lot of your neurons and like your actual nerves are coated in a fatty chain. Like it's myelinated.
Yeah.
Myelin's made out of fat. So it only makes sense to have a good source of fat in the body to improve cognitive function, right? So I think omega-3s are one of the things that are severely underlooked for that. They're more so looked at for things like cardio health and joint health. But if I was to recommend one supplement to somebody, it would definitely be omega-3 because our diets are pretty low in omega-3, like good sources of omega-3. And just overall, it's one of the things that keeps the brain development pretty up there. Yeah.
What would you recommend for like the dosage for the omega-3 supplement? And is there like a specific brand you recommend maybe?
Yeah, so
Obviously
you
we
want
can
to
do
look at
foods. Yeah.
the foods is good. You want to look at the DHA and EPA levels, right? It depends on what the purpose is. If I'm not mistaken, I think the higher the DHA, the better it is for the brain.
Okay.
So you want to look at, I think it's like a 2-to-1 ratio of DHA to EPA.
Okay.
Or if you want more of a like physiological enhancement in terms of like you want the joint health, the cardiovascular health, higher EPA is better. I believe it's like either like a 700-500 ratio. with
Okay.
the actual doses, but typically I prefer to use either the Believe brand omega-3 just because the actual levels of EPA DHA are very solid per tablespoon serving. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, per teaspoon serving. Or you want to look at things like cod liver oil.
Okay.
Cod liver oil is one of those that's not the tastiest. They haven't really like perfected the taste formula of it, but if you're looking at cold pressed cod liver oil from like the Arctic fish, that is very, very good for your brain. It has other fatty acids in it that also help. But that's another really good one is cod liver oil if you can get your hands on that. Yeah.
And then
Would
if
you say
you're
it's possible to get that omega-3 from foods, or like
Oh yeah.
with the modern diet, it's not really there?
I think with the modern diet, it's become a lot easier to be able to get it. It's just people's food choices aren't really allowing for it, right? We're looking at more like plant oils right now that have like a higher omega-6 ratio in them. And the omega-6 has been kind of sort of linked to higher inflammatory markers, all those other things. So you're not going to really get as much omega-3, like pure source omega-3, unless you eat like a really high fish diet. Vegetarian base, you could do flaxseed oil. Again, you got to look out for that omega-6. Sometimes some foods contain omega-9. Things like hemp seeds, what are those things called? The little crunchy pieces. I forget the name of them. There's another seed oil that has a high amount of omega-9, and omega-9 you don't want. Like that's we get too much from that from like our processed foods already, right? So
okay.
definitely if you can go like the Arctic fish route, that's probably one of the best sources. And again, you want to make sure that it's sourced correctly, right? It's not like overly farmed. It's pretty like wild caught fish. It's usually the best source, right? There's so many food groups out there that do contain it, but honestly, fish is probably one of the best sources of it. Yeah.
That makes. What about algae oil? Is that
That, yeah, like you can look at that as well.
okay?
I haven't really looked too much into algae oil. I know that
Okay.
there's more iodine and like sea mineral content in it,
Okay, I got
which
you.
would be beneficial for other things, but definitely I think yeah, you could look at that option as well. I'd have to do a little bit more looking into algae oil to be honest with you. I haven't looked into that one.
And you recommend more like liquid form, eh? Because I do pills. I have fish oil pills. Like I think I just got like a Amazon some ultra strength fish oil. That's what
Yeah,
I got sold on it. But is what would you look at when someone's because I want to do I want to do a whole different podcast on just supplements, right?
right.
And talk about that specifically. But like I guess we can just talk about fish oil specifically. What would you look for if like I don't know if that's something you, you would is there
Yeah,
something you would look at saying like
there
somebody like I
is.
don't have believe anything around my area, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm like in China or some shit,
Ah.
and I don't know. I'm just like, TGJ
Yeah.
Global, right?
Yeah.
So so what would they look at in the supplement to be like, oh, this is pretty good?
So there's a lot. That's a whole
Okay,
nother, again, it's a whole nother topic in itself, and even
I
like what
got
we're
you.
learning in school right now. But there you can do some research on this, but typically what you want to look for is the way it's manufactured, the processing route it's taken, right?
Okay,
Very rarely is there like any high heat treatment in fish oil manufacturing because it would ruin the purpose of the fish oil. You would literally destroy the nutritional value in it. You
okay,
also want to look at what the sources of the fish are. Sometimes some companies aren't very honest about the sources of the fish oil they're using. You want to look at things that are like salmon oil, like krill oil. So the size of the fish matters, right? Are they like bottom dwellers or are they the ones that eat the bottom dwellers, right? So looking at the fish sources that your omega-3s are coming from will have a pretty good impact on the bioavailability of the oil. And I use
okay,
that term loosely because it's still going to be there for absorption, but how it impacts the body will differ. And then again, like I said, that EPA DHA or DHA EPA ratio is super important because you might be getting something that you're thinking is more so for like one thing, but really and truly it's for another. And make sure it's dosed correctly, right?
okay,
Again, you want to look for a 2-to-1 ratio of the DHA to EPA. And then again, country of origin kind of matters. You don't really want to be buying some underground cheap fish oil. A
yeah,
lot of them are underdosed, full of like fillers, like gelatin capsules are usually like, or not gelatin, like the capsules made out of the glycerol and all that stuff are usually kind of sort of a cheaper way of filling them. And they actually have an impact on how the fish oil is absorbed, which is why I'm a very big fan of liquid fish oil because there's
okay,
nothing encasing it, allowing the body to absorb it better, and there's no like anti-nutrient in it that's gonna kind of sort of like, haha, you're not gonna get the full dose because I'm here type thing. But yes, definitely stick to the liquid one. I know the taste can be atrocious, but there's NutraC, which is a good brand, Believe. There's another lab, I forget what it's called. I think it's like Nutraceutical Pharma or something like that. There's a couple of like actual like brands. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but I usually recommend to people.
Okay.
But definitely, like I said, it's not always brand based, but there's brands that are like tried and tested to have very good quality products. So those are the ones I usually stick for my client.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just reading the mine. I think I got scammed. So this is from
Oh,
the EPA in one fish oil is 690 and then DHA is
okay.
260.
Yeah,
So I got
again,
I
that's usually the cheaper route, right? So
I got decked, bro. This
yeah,
is supposed to be
yeah,
doubled. And then this is from Alaska and it's from
that's
tilapia.
not bad.
Tilapia sourced.
Yeah, you
So
see, okay, so Alaska's good, but
yeah.
tilapia source fish oil, again, tilapia's farmed. Again, that's a whole nother thing of its
Oh
own. But if you
geez,
want to
eh?
look at, there's certain fish that you
That's
just,
pretty sick, bro. Okay. That's cool.
despite being jacked, you should just stay away from because it's literally like swamp water fish, unfortunately. I am if all food is great, food is nutritious and food is
Yeah, yeah,
wonderful, but
yeah.
the certain quality of foods I'd question. Yeah.
That is wild. Okay, cool.
That's
So I'm
great. Hey,
th-
you learned
I'm
something there.
so just to get enough DHA, would you say like I'll still finish this? So I'll probably take like five of them. So I get my 1,000 mg or some shit. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, just again, we can talk after. I can kind of look at that for you, but I would definitely be careful.
okay?
Don't go taking them all
I
just to
got
get
you.
the proper
I got you.
levels of it.
Okay, wicked. So we got the cognitive function a little bit. So you just more focus, more dialed in, that kind of stuff. How you're performing at work, school,
Yep. Yep.
relationship, maybe if you're more present or not, right?
Yep.
The second big component, it's crazy, it's already almost an hour, but the second component is the training
Yes.
performance, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I
Yep.
guess, most people's aim is like, how can I only improve my training performance? That's all they look at. And it's funny we
Yeah.
spend 50 minutes not even talking about the training performance because everything else is more important, right? And
It
like
is because that's actually
that's
gonna
lead
downstream to your training performance, right?
to
So
to the training performance, right? So
yeah.
say
Yeah.
like now the person is just like they got fucking pineapples in their fridge, they got papayas, they got like cinnamon,
Fish
like
oil.
snorting the cinnamon, everything they're doing, right? Um, Now that it comes to their gym performance,
Mhm.
what are some things they can look for in terms of things like this is a sign like my performance in the gym is pretty good and consistent. Like
Mhm.
what are some signs?
Definitely overall, like I guess we can use the term endurance, like energy efficiency.
Okay.
Like how long can you last during your sessions? How you're able to perform so your output, like how are you getting stronger? Are you able to like progress in your lifts? And then recovery. Obviously, recovery is super important. Recovery and growth in the gym are like intertwined, right? If you're not
Yeah.
recovering, you're not growing. You want to grow, you got to recover. So those would be the number one things I would look at is are you able to progress in your performance and are you able to recover? And again, one of the same, right? Recovery
Okay.
performance needs to be simultaneously working together. So that would be the first thing I would always look at is if I have an athlete that seemingly is doing everything correct and maybe the nutrition part we haven't talked about and like that's the one missing factor. Like let's say they have a great program, like they have like their progressive overload, they're doing great, but then they stall or like they just are not progressing the way they wanted to or they're getting injured all the time. They're not recovering, right? That's what you start looking at is okay, well, what are you eating? How much of it are you eating? Are your macronutrient ratios proper, like for your performance goal, right? So
Okay.
we would just overall look at how the person's output is and how their recovery is, and then kind of sort of make that linkage between their nutrition and their performance.
Okay. Okay, so you have anything here? I have a nice question still. Okay, I'm so curious. I'm just kind of making this a selfish podcast, but well, so say for example, the individual has their gut stuff like in order now, like they have good digestion, like their, bowels just look amazing. They look at them all
Mhm.
night or all morning, whatever. Um, they have good foods in their diet, everything is kind of streamlined, and now their sole focus is performance in the gym and growth in the gym, right? They just want to get really, really jacked. So
Mhm.
how would you set up somebody's what would the main things would you look at hierarchy wise like total caloric intake, like say like digestion is blessed, they're not getting bloated,
Mhm.
they're digesting
Yep.
everything
Yep.
good, would you look at the performance is now stagnant in the gym and now trying to improve
Mhm.
it? So first would you look at the full calorie intake or would you look at macros first or would you look at the meals around the training session or like maybe the meal the night before the training session? How would you break that down?
So all of what you said is literally what I would look at, but I think
Okay.
I would just start with overall like caloric intake, right?
Okay,
Meaning
cool.
like is the person really eating what they think they're eating? Because a problem that I've noticed with clients in general is like they're like, yeah, I eat so much food. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what'd you eat? They're like, oh, like I had like a donut, like a little bit of carbs before my workout. Yeah, like I get carbs before my workout. They'll have like a banana. and they want to pull like a 405 bench or something. I don't know, something ridiculous. And I'm just like, me and Carter would look at them like, you're not eating enough. But they're claiming they're eating enough, right? So that's usually the number one thing. I'm sure you run into this too. Like, yeah, bro, I eat so much food. And then they tell
Yeah.
you what they eat, and they're like barely eating 1,300 calories. You're like, well, I wonder why we're not progressing in the gym, right? So you would
Yeah.
look at, first of all, is overall calories.
Okay.
Then we can start looking at like, okay, what are your macros, right? And again,
Okay.
macros are a very, very subjective thing to each individual, depending on what part of their fitness journey they're on, what phase they're in, are they plateauing, are they not plateauing? All of that stuff can be manipulated. But let's just
Okay.
take a look at overall how much carbs you're eating, how much protein you're eating, and how much fats you're eating. Let's
Okay.
digest that. Let's figure that out first, right?
Okay.
Then maybe you're inhibiting your workouts by eating too many fats close to your workout. Maybe you're not one of those people that does well with fats too close to your workout. Let's move those around. Maybe you're somebody who does have a little bit of a different metabolic process. You could use a bit of fats to slow down your carb digestion because you're digesting carbs way too fast. So you need like a,
Mm.
like an anti-catalyst to kind of slow things down. So you'll maybe put some fats in. So it'll be very, very, again, subjective to the person. But
Yeah.
first thing is overall calories, macros, and then we can look at meal timing. Like, okay, are you one of those freaks that like insulin spikes are all the time? Or the opposite, are you becoming insulin resistant because of the way you've been eating? So now your carbs are doing fuck all for you. You're literally just like eating and eating carbs, and you're like, I could take a nap, right? So we got to start looking at that then. Meal timing, when we're eating, what we're eating. So overall calories, macros, meal timing, and then we can just look at overall quality of food, right? If that's still like a lingering issue. Even though digestion's fine, maybe we need to have better food sources, right? Sometimes that's an issue.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll do better with oats after your workout before your workout, right?
Mm.
Stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, because I recently I've been playing around with is I moved my oats at nighttime,
Yep.
which is but like almond butter and like things like that's a little bit higher in fat and a little
Mhm.
bit higher in like slow digesting carbs per se.
Yep.
And I know like we've talked about how like the carbs at nighttime could make you feel a little bit sluggish in the morning,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it's like too much in carbs.
Yes. Yes.
But I've noticed like it kind of helps the glycogen storage in the
Yep.
11 a.m. workout instead of
Exactly.
having it
Yep.
at like 9:30, 10,
9:30. Yeah.
right? So, and then I end up having like a banana and like sometimes I'll do like a couple sourdough slices and like a
Yep.
scoop of protein, just quick digesting everything
Mhm.
before the workout, like 90 minutes. And then the oatmeal at night is kind of fueling the workout a little bit as well. Is
Yeah,
that
that makes sense. Yeah, it does
makes
make sense.
sense?
And again,
Okay.
you're a little bit more of an advanced individual, whereas you've been training longer. You've gone through numerous dieting cycles, cutting,
Yeah.
bulking, right? So you kind of sort of figured out what your body responds pretty well to, or
Okay.
like your coach has. So there are people who do well with like backloading carbs, meaning that they'll eat
Yeah.
a bunch of carbs the night before, and it does spill over into the next day, and they're usually fine. But that's what I was saying about how like you might feel a bit groggy in the morning, but
Yeah.
remember I mentioned too, it might actually affect your performance really well.
Yeah.
So that grogginess to you might be worth it, right? Maybe you're not that sensitive.
Yeah.
And again, oats are a little bit higher in fiber, slower digesting. You pair it with a fat, it can do the process and it could store easily for the next day to be used for energy for your workout, right? So it's going to really depend on the individual. And after you do an analysis of like their overall, I guess, like training and like digestion, and then you can make a judgment call as a coach as to like what's better suited for them and when to time things. Yeah.
Okay. Wicked. So we'll make it really easy for anyone who watch practical. So pre-workout meal, what would you give like a generic time range for having that meal? And then what would be it? I know it depends on the individual. Some people respond a little bit better to carbs and they might need more fats in it.
Yep.
Some people might just digest it really fast or really slow, so they need less fats maybe. But
Yep.
in a generic way, is there something you ballpark wise? You'd be like, hey, have a pre-workout meal around this time, and then
Yeah, so usually with our clients, like it's anywhere between like an hour to like 30 minutes, depending on their training style and like at what point in the day too, right?
I
For the
got you.
more early morning workout people who need a bit more food, I would probably time it a little bit closer to their workout, right?
Okay.
And the individual who's had almost a full day of eating, they could probably go an hour-ish before their workout, depending on what day it is too, right? For a client who's doing like a really heavy leg day or like a full body, like like power lift day, most likely include some carbs 30 minutes before the workout.
Okay.
Just enough so that they don't feel overly full, because that could actually take away from your performance. If you're still digesting a lot of food as you're trying to work out, the body is not really good at like doing two things at once. It does a
Yeah.
lot of things at once, but at the same time, digesting and then triggering the CNS response to lift weights and then put stress there will kind of slow the digestion down. So you'd want to probably ballpark it between the hour to like 40-minute mark maybe.
Okay.
And then post-workout, again, there's a lot of variances with that one as well, but just
Okay.
try to get some there is no such thing as an anabolic window. Like unless your blood sugar really drops and you need something like after your workout instantly, 100%. Like if a client's doing a really high intensity workout, they will need glucose to replenish right after. Otherwise, they're gonna go hypoglycemic and they're gonna faint, right? So you don't need to have that post-workout meal as importantly as the pre for performance, but for recovery, post-workout meal is pretty important within like the hour to 2 hour range. Some studies say up to three. Honestly, some people are fine fasting even until like they're able to eat whenever. But it's just more so for comfort, physiological function level to have a bit of glucose to kind of sort of get you back up to base level after a workout, right?
And
So
that
that's
would
usually what we're looking at. Yeah.
be like a little bit higher in carbs and protein in both of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I personally for like our clients, I give them a little. If it's again, if they're not in a fat loss phase, right? If you're looking at
Yeah.
fat loss phase, it's need to be done a little bit more with caution and what the purpose is of the fat loss phase. But for
Yeah.
the average client who's just training really hard, who like maybe like is a morning workout person, they got to go to work after. Yeah, a good amount of easily digestible carbs and like a protein shake or like some kind of easier digestible source of protein, right?
Okay.
You wouldn't really give your client like a casein based protein after their workout. Like you could, and there's probably merit to it, but you'd
Yeah.
probably want something a little bit quicker for the reparative process. So you're looking at easier digesting carbs post and easier digesting protein post as well. Yeah.
And
When you
then pre
say
as well. Yeah.
easier digesting carbs, like for the people that don't know what that would be, like what would be some examples that you give out?
Yeah, you could do like okay, rice cakes, like a rice meal even, right? Fructose is great for that, right? Like that's usually when you can do your banana and your shake is a really good pairing. You can look at things like some kind of toast, right? It really depends on what the client likes and what they want, but you want to look at faster digesting carbohydrate sources, right? Like your simple sugars, your simple carbs. For the sake of A, nutrient delivery and B, blood sugar uptake, right? Just to make sure the person doesn't pass out and get like lethargic after their workout, right?
And the same type of food choices pre-workout, right? Like faster carbs
Y-
ish.
Yeah, so again, it depends on the timing. If
Okay.
you're planning on eating like an hour and a half before your workout and you know you're
Yeah.
not going to have time or like you want to just take some rice cakes with you in your gym bag just in case, you can do a slower digesting carb. For example, if you get up at 5 a.m., you're not training till 9, you could definitely like give yourself that little bit more of a slower digesting carb to kind of build up in the body as you're anticipating the workout. And then have a quicker source of carbohydrate closer to the window of your workout.
Okay.
But if it's like right before the workout, there's really no point of doing a heavier digesting carb because it's going to hinder your workout, right? We
Yeah.
we have science and data to prove that like it's a little bit more efficient for the body to have a faster sugar than it is a slower sugar. Um, again, but it really varies to the individual, right? It depends on the time they're training. It depends on how long their training sessions are. If you should backload some carbs or whatever, like it's really dependent on your client. Yeah.
We'll do a whole because I know it's already up the hour. Probably have stuff to do instead of
It's all
talking
good. It's
about.
all good. No, it's
Um,
no problem.
but we'll do. I think the whole one of the podcasts I want to definitely do is how to do a proper fat loss phase because that's
Yeah,
something that
sure.
people struggle with performance in the gym and they kind of just like
Yeah.
put performance to the side. They're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
gonna feel weak and low energy because I'm
Mm,
cutting now, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
they kind of like don't emphasize performance when that's when you get the look that you want, right? If you
exactly. And
do
you
the
can
gym.
actually that phase it's very interesting that you mentioned that because we've
Yeah.
had some clients that we've talked to about this where they anticipate the loss of strength and like the loss of growth during a cut phase. And they're like, what's impossible in a deficit? There's this thing in the body that creates efficiency in the system, meaning your body is able to do more with less. And it's really cool how the
Mm,
human body is able to do that. So less calories does not always it should not, if structured properly, it should not equate um substantial amount of muscle loss and strength loss. If it does, the person who's creating your program and structure is doing something terribly wrong because it's like you're using the body's adaptability mechanism to its finest, right? Meaning our bodies can adapt to anything we throw at it. It should be able to adapt within the caloric range you give it, right? The duration of that caloric deficit is up for debate, of course, because everybody has a threshold they'll reach where now the body is just depleted as hell and like it can't do anything. That's just like a health issue now. But in
yeah.
terms of like a very phased out fat loss phase to get you to a specific look for a specific period of time, there should be little to no strength loss. Yeah.
Okay. That's yeah, because that's another like I don't know how much time do you have?
I've got time. Yeah, I got
Yeah,
lots of time.
Kags, you good?
I'm
Because
good.
I have this in you. I know this is a question where people struggle because they go in these fat loss phases forever. Like they're
Yeah,
always like that individual you talk to that always dieting. Like
they're always cutting.
they're always
Yeah.
cutting, right? It's like you ask them, say, hey, yeah, bro, I just get back on it now, and like some people they're down like say 70 pounds or they're down a
Hmm.
lot of weight, but they still have to lose like another 50, 60 pounds, right?
Hmm.
Um, so for those people, and I'm sure we have clients like this who have a long fat loss journey to go to, like
Hmm.
100 pounds maybe.
Yeah.
Would you break that apart into phases, like in terms of having phases of higher calories, or you would just put them in a deficit for just the whole time because like their body has so much fat storage that they will be
Hmm.
able to kind of face that or I guess adapt to that deficit a little bit better than like say
Right.
somebody who's already leaner and then they cut, right?
Yeah. So
So
you just kind of sort of answered it there right there. So a person who's a little bit leaner has less to work with, right?
yeah,
They will most likely hit a detrimental point in their caloric deficit where they start using other tissues for energy. And
gotcha.
then you're looking at going into a complete like just self-engulfing state of like the body is now catabolizing everything it can because you're not giving it enough, right? And then we
Okay.
start approaching borderline like orthorexia, like eating disorder phases, right? So that's one end of the spectrum where like you're
Okay.
fucking you're perma cutting for life because you think that you're never lean enough. Then we
Okay.
have the opposite end of the spectrum of like the really, really obese individual who's got a lot to work with. They got like infinite sources of like body fat that they can utilize, right? Now it's not to say that glycogen doesn't empty out at a similar rate, which you can deplete, I guess, like an overweight person at some point, right? But that's more so of like a psychological CNS stress, meaning like they're just
Mm,
tired because of the lifestyle change and because of the like the I guess harsher dieting, right? For people who are a little bit on the higher body fat end, I would personally just probably take them through a couple of different cycles of different dieting variations, meaning like maybe a potential carb cycle or maybe like a reduction in the training to let the body recover. But they will have no shortage of like fuel source until they're at a specific body fat level, right?
okay.
Um, and that's just purely because of the amount of storage they have. The body's been storing for so long. So they're not going to really run out the same way as somebody who's 15, maybe 18% body fat would, right?
Okay.
They got long ways to go. So for individuals like that, you can probably push a little bit harder. They can, I don't want to say suffer a little bit more, but they got a bit more grit in them to go through, right? Before they can just be like, okay, now I have to really watch my calorie intake because I could start burning off other things in my body that I need, right?
Yeah.
Versus somebody who's relatively lean, prepping for a show, who can take shorter durations of the deficit and then bounce back to a healthier level, right? And still
Okay.
maintain a look, right? With reverse
Okay.
dieting. So it does vary on the type of client for sure.
Only reason I ask this too is because a lot of people who are, again, when you're in that state of like being overly weight and maybe it's like been your whole identity for a long time, it can mess
Hmm.
with your head a little bit too. But
Yeah.
then a lot of people, like when they go through these journeys, they maybe hit like a plateau,
Yep.
and they start blaming their metabolism, right?
Of course. Yeah.
My metabolism is slow, my hormones are messed up.
Hmm.
And like I'm sure there's obviously premise to all of that. And there's stuff to that, but in the
Hmm.
hierarchy of things, say somebody's trying to lose 100 pounds and they lose like the first 30, but then after that they start saying, my metabolism and all that stuff is just like too slow and my hormones or whatever.
Hmm.
Would you maybe I don't know if this is even a good question, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Because it's like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because you see this online all the time, like there's like in people's bio, I am the metabolic fixer, right?
Yeah,
And
hormone specialist, endocrine like
yeah.
genie and all that shit.
So
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
should someone look at that? Like, what would be the phase of like that individual who's always been fat or like who's trying to lose weight, for better
Yeah,
terms?
yeah.
It's like when would they look
So
at that part?
it's a very blanket term, like metabolism slows down or like my metabolism plateaued, right? Because metabolism is what? It's like the sum of all the cellular processes in the body, right? So if we're looking at speeding up metabolism or like getting the body to work faster, we're looking at like doing like alterations to the overall like processes in the human body. But
Yeah.
more so, it's used as a reason for one of two things. Either one, they actually have like a pathology, meaning they actually have something wrong with like their thyroid or their hormone, or because of the amount of like fat they hold. Fat has Cholesterols are fats, right? So a lot of the time these people have cholesterol ratios that are out of whack. Usually when cholesterol is high, their estrogen is really high because estrogen and cholesterol need each other, et cetera, et cetera. So they may have something wrong with them, like physiologically and pathologically speaking, that needs to be diagnosed with blood work right away, right? If you're
Okay.
like the kind of if you're the type of trainer or coach who has like the discrepancy to dissect blood work and like help people out with that, you can start there. But I want to say a good like 7, 8 times out of 10, there's really nothing wrong with them. They just need to look at some things like what is their NEAT like, right? So their non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Like, are they walking? Are they moving? Or are they just only going to the gym and doing that, right? Sleep. Like, what is their sleep habits like, right? Like, are they sleeping enough? Because that's a huge, huge, huge key for fat loss is if your sleep is like bullshit, you're gonna have a very hard time losing weight because of your stressors, right? Your body is not going to release fat cells if the cortisol is too high, for layman's terms. And then we're looking at things like, okay, maybe it's time to now manipulate the diet, right? And then maybe we have to change the training style. So it's there's a lot of other things that need to be implemented first before these people should just like be blaming their metabolism or all their pathologies and stuff. The dog's got to go out. He's like, you guys have been talking too long.
Oh man, he was listening.
It's so cute. Yeah. But yeah, so those would definitely be the things that I would look at. I wouldn't blame the person's metabolism, or like they have like issues unless they've actually been diagnosed with issues and you're working through those issues. But it's mainly just a structure issue. Like, okay, we have to restructure the workouts, we have to restructure the diet a little differently now to start manipulating because the body has adapted, right? Once it adapts, plateaus are essentially just adaptations in the body.
Okay.
So
So
Now,
until
so
until
somebody,
blood work has been done, like you can't really say that's the case there.
usually, yeah, like again, unless like the client is like working with somebody like me where they have like underlying either genetical issues or we have to look at like something, downstream like a gut malabsorption or there's other like more very intricate things wrong with the person in terms of their health. But if we're looking at just a general individual who's trying to lose body fat, who has no diabetes, no high blood pressure, no nothing, no cholesterol issues, and they want to go the route of blaming like, oh, it's just my genes or it's my metabolism or it's like I have a thyroid issue. No, you don't. You just need to restructure your program. You need to change your diet and we need to up the NEAT. We need to get better sleep and we need to make better food choices. That's pretty much as simple as that, right?
just, yeah,
So
just
it's
do
just
it for a
about
long,
creating
yeah,
exactly. Just and again,
like,
consistency and endurance, right? You got to stick it out because
yeah,
I always tell people it's easier to gain that fat than it is to lose it.
Yeah.
Good things come with more work. Like nothing good ever came easy, right? Only the bad shit comes easy, but then it sticks around longer. And you try to reverse it, it's gonna be a journey. It's not gonna be easy, that's for sure.
yeah. Okay, sick. I just wanted to kind of come up because a lot of people do end up taking that band-aids route and they fall for these random things, right?
Yeah.
And then they end up staying in the same circle, right? When
Yep. Yeah.
they just do the things they're kind of avoiding, which they know, walk more, sleep
Yeah.
better, make better food choices daily basis,
Yep.
and just do it for
Yep.
a long period of time, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
People
Those are,
people have to do people have to do the hard shit to get the good results, right? Like that's all it comes down to. It's
yeah,
our like without getting too like in depth with it, like our society has created a very easy route for people to victimize themselves, right? To be like, oh, woe is me. Look, I'm like overweight and now I don't know what to do with it. It's like, well, your health is literally in your hands. You can do something with it. There are things that you are just avoiding doing because it's uncomfortable, right?
yeah,
Because you don't want to, because it's different than what you're used to doing. But those are the things that you need to do in order to get where you want to go. And
yeah,
until we have that mindset, it doesn't matter what diet, what metabolism issue you have, what disposition you have, you're
yeah.
not going to go anywhere, right? So, woe is me will only get you so far.
Yeah, it's all that quick, 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 right? So everything is
Yeah,
quick,
yeah,
everything is convenient. There's no
yeah,
delayed
yeah.
gratification stuff. So
No, no, yeah.
that's the game.
Patience,
Patience is
patience.
the name of the game. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I took a lot of your time. Thank you. That was a
No,
lot of
it's all
knowledge.
good.
I took so many
Yeah.
notes, man. This is sick.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
have
Cool.
I've
Cool.
learned
Yeah,
so much.
I
Dope.
got
Cool. Cool, guys.
I got like I already got the next few topics planned too. So, but
Cool. Perfect.
those should be fun.
Where can
Um,
the
Awesome.
where can the people find you, Dasha?
yeah,
So I am on Instagram at Dasha Pravda Wellness, and then we also have YouTube. It's Dynamic Performance, so it's dynamic with a D, Y, and then with a K at the end. So Dynamic Performance. Yeah, we're on YouTube. We're on Instagram for now. We have a website as well. It's Dynamic Coaching.
sick.
Yeah, feel free to check us out. We got some programs on there, and please do feel free to message me about any kind of holistic naturopathic questions. Always glad to help.
And what do you guys do you guys specialize in specific things like taking on specific type of clients or what do you guys do with the clients?
So we basically take on a very broad spectrum of individuals. We do have
Sick.
some competitive clients. We do have some people who we're working with that have some more serious health issues. But their initial goals were always like, I want to get on my health and fitness journey, but I have like A, B, C, D wrong with me. So we're doing some preliminary fixing and then we're getting them on the roads to either like, competing in the future or just to overall being like a very healthy Gen Pop person. And then we do have athletes as well. We have some golfers, which is pretty cool. It's an interesting niche to work with. But yeah, we take on a large array of athletes. So if you guys have questions or you guys want to inquire, check us out, Dynamic Performance.
Fire.
Yes.
That's gonna be another podcast. I'll get you and Qatar on here.
Yeah,
We'll do
yeah,
a coaching podcast, right? Like,
definitely. Yeah, he's the man
yeah,
with the
yeah.
mindset behind everything, that's for
I
sure. Yeah.
I learned a lot of coaching from Qatar. That's why I was in accounting before I learned. So I was watching him train, and I was like, holy
There
fuck,
you
this guy!
go.
Like, I took all his Excel spreadsheets, and I was like, bro, you're like so you're like so advanced, bro. This is crazy.
Yeah. It's next
So yeah,
level. Yeah.
guys, check him out. Dasha will be back very soon, and yeah, Kags, any last words?
No, thank you so much. Appreciate the
You're
time.
welcome,
Check it
guys.
out.
No problem.
That was wicked. Okay,
Awesome.
bye bye.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, guys. All right. Take care.